Look what you did, you little jerk!
What's going on, jerk faces? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Circle of Jerks podcast. We're going to be talking about a great movie today, The Golem from 1920. With me, we got Andy, as always. What's going on, Andy?
What's up?
And our resident Jew, Dan.
How's it going?
Of course, and because we are talking about The Golem, which is one of the few Jewish films that I know of, got to have our resident Jew on.
Shalom, y'all.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, since the Jews control Hollywood, isn't all
Yes.
all movies?
Well said.
Spielbergo and the rest of them.
And that is a topic for another episode. However, don't forget your questions. If you want to send in those comments, I'll address them.
But no, we had been talking about this episode for a while, wanting to review The Golem, which is a great silent film from the 20s that, similar to like when we did Metropolis, a lot of the footage has been lost. There actually was supposed to be like a trilogy of films on The Golem, this monster film based off of this Jewish lore, apparently. And the one that does remain is the origin story, which kind of helps. So we get the origin story of the Golem, how he was created, and all that. But there was supposed to be more films based off the Golem, and they're lost to history, just like a lot of silent films. So thought it'd be fun to talk about. I did buy the Blu-ray of it. It has several different versions of the score. I've listened to a few of those. There's some audio commentary that I have not listened to, but I thought I'd bring on Dan, who we did discuss a lot of the lore. He does know about it. So there we go. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that. Andy, have you ever seen this film before?
No, I haven't. But although I was familiar with the folklore surrounding this movie.
Simpsons, am I right?
Well, no, particularly one of my favorite 90s era cartoons, Gargoyles.
Which is similar.
right.
Yeah, it is kind of a similar like.
Yeah,
well,
no, because like there's an episode where okay, this is for all the nerds out there, but in the second season, what is it? The leader Goliath and like the human friend, I forget, and then another gargoyle that they have like that happened.
Right.
That turns out to be Goliath's daughter. Are like kind of like globe hopping around the world. And in one episode, they end up in Prague, right? And then
accurate.
Yeah,
yep.
there's a kind of ally to the Gargoyles. Initially, he was a antagonist, but he slowly became and he's an older man, and he wanted to gain immortality essentially, and so he tracked down like the legend or the folklore of the Golem, and to wrap it up, like he puts his spirit into the Golem to attain immortality.
Whoa!
And so that was
forgot about that episode.
Yeah,
you're right.
Cut, but that was my first introduction to the
folklore.
The folklore of Golem.
Yeah,
got it. Dan, have you ever seen this before?
No, this is the first time when you introduced it to me that I'd even heard that there was a movie, let alone a silent film, made about the Golem legend.
You had heard about the legend, just not like
the legend we knew. Growing up Jewish, it's one you probably hear about, but not one of the more famous myths or legends. Which, to be honest, all the Jewish myths that we hear about, we teach our kids, we have holidays or festivals about, are mostly biblical era legends. And this one, it only goes back.
So this is more like
all your Samson. This is all your Samson comics that you like.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So this is more extra biblical.
This is much more recent. As a matter of fact, the origin of the Golem legend goes back no more than the Middle Ages. Okay, the most famous reference, which is usually the one copied, whether it's in pop culture, The Simpsons, the episode of Gargoyles, is from Prague in the Czech Republic, formerly Czechoslovakia, of a rabbi who created this golem, this monster, so to speak, although the word golem just kind of means empty shell or simple being, created as a protector of the Jewish community around 1500 in Prague. Now, that rabbi, who his name was Rabbi Lowe, which the movie actually
Does
attributes
reference.
correctly. Yeah, so
Right.
they did their research, and we'll go into this further about what kind of research they did, and did they have any Jews on the research team? Short answer, I assumed probably not, but we'll get into that later on in the episode. And so anyway, but the references were correct, so that's probably the origin of this legend. However, doing some research into the myth of the golem itself, the first time it was written down for sure was only the mid 1800s. So it was about 300 plus years after the supposed setting of the original golem. It could have even gone back farther than that. It could have been 12 or 1300s. There are some very vague references that were attributed to the time, all in persecuted Jewish communities in Europe. And so it makes sense that you would want to create this legend, or maybe this actual, straw man, scarecrow statue to try to scare off any who are trying to do you harm.
Yeah. So I came to this, I probably saw that Gargoyles episode, not like remembering it too much, but I remember playing, the Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest games, and one of the monsters on there was the Golem. It was it was kind of like this rock monster. It's so not looking like the one that we see in the movie. And the movie itself, I didn't hear about that until actually I was, one of the YouTube channels that I watch, Cinemassacre. He did a quick review on the Golem, kind of going through like monster movies. I was like, this looks awesome. Like, I don't know how I missed this, because I do, like I said, I love silent films, and but like I said, we are still new into the film exploration and like reviews and stuff like that. So I'm always finding new things, and there's always going to be new films that I've never seen, from the past, and this just happens to be one of them. And just learning about it, I was like, I would love to like actually watch this, and and then once I watched it, I was like, well, I gotta own this, because I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna get this. It's really fucking awesome. And the person I wanted to watch it most with was you, because I was like, I was curious about your thoughts on the film. And yeah, like we'll dive into it. Like, what did you think? Because this is, like I said, this is your first viewing of this, right?
Right. So let me say first, as much as legends go, whether they're Greek or Roman mythology, or any culture, any religion, Jewish mythology, like I said, when you hear that word, you're thinking, oh, this is probably a biblical story, or extra biblical story that is passed down orally and then eventually written down at some point. Whereas the Golem, even the references, the oral references, let alone the written references, are pretty slim and vague over the last couple centuries, in that there is many recent pop culture references, mainly in cartoons or video games, Gargoyles, The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode that I referenced.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, not, but in Tolkien, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
because Smeagol's alter ego is called Golem.
Is called Golem, right? And I always,
which is interesting, because when you bring up the translation of that word, meaning empty vessel, and you go, Smeagol eventually becomes an empty vessel.
Yeah, exactly. And so that probably wasn't a coincidence. It would have been too much of a coincidence, that Tolkien names him Gollum, and he says, oh, it's based on the sound that his throat makes when he coughs. That's unclear. But there was clearly, Tolkien did his research
he was not
on.
A stupid man.
He was not. Oh, yeah, creating entire legends and languages of his own. He did his own research, but it was not just in The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, but for all you Pokemon fans out there, as you may know, one of the rock Pokemon is named Golem, and also looks nothing like
Monster Rancher is another one.
Monster Rancher is another one. That's right. And so this one is kind of right. Yeah, that's true.
Everyone knows about Pokemon, but not everyone knows Monster Rancher.
Yeah, I'm one of the few that actually likes Monster Rancher over all three of like the big three. Yeah.
Digimon, Pokemon.
Yeah, I love Monster Rancher the most.
But this Golem legend, the most common reference that you folks have probably heard that stemmed from it is the famous Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was just gonna bring that up.
Frankenstein's monster
cinematic archaeology is right there.
Is most likely based on, at least vaguely based on, the Golem myth. Like I said, the Golem myth, oral stories wise, goes back to 1500, if not before. And
so do you think this is where Mary Shelley got her idea, or partially had her inspiration for her story?
It could be. In the Golem, both the myth and as we've seen in the movie, there's no reference to grave robbing or putting together a human being. We're talking about making a protector, a monster, an avatar, if you will, out of clay or dirt or earth. That's how the Golem is always referenced. Right. But it makes sense that doing some research into when this was first, the Golem legend was first written down for sure, was in the early 1800s by a guy named Baruch Spinoza, who actually was the most famous Jewish philosopher of the era, and really one of the 2 or 3 huge Jewish philosophers of all time. So what he wrote went. He was also very controversial in the Jewish community, and we can address that in another episode. He was, as far as I know, the last, at least, major figure in the Jewish community in Europe who was excommunicated.
Oh, wow.
And he was
too controversial for the Jews.
Right. Yeah, when you're too controversial for the Jews, oh boy, yeah. And so, Spinoza, fascinating guy and fascinating writings. And so he had recorded something on the Golem legend and was the first to, for sure, attribute the legend to this Rabbi Loew in Prague in the Middle Ages. And sure enough, Spinoza was alive in first half of the 18th century is when he was active. And Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, I believe, in 1818. So it could well be.
The timeline kind of works.
The timeline kind of works. Spinoza was German. And Mary Shelley, I believe, was British. But certainly she could have known about him. It's very possible. They were contemporaries of a sort.
So that it's because I when I think of the book, certainly there's some potential inspiration there, but then especially the film, because obviously the Golem film came out well before the Universal Frankenstein movie, but you definitely see some of that. There's a lot of that, when we talk about cinematic archaeology. I totally see Frankenstein in this because you were they're not creating the monster out of used body parts and using electricity. They're using more magic and
and clay
right. But it's still kind of the same idea. And it's it's a monster that is misunderstood, and it's not his fault that things go wrong. It's the people that have created the problem, whether it's the perception from the people or his creators, especially the assistant to the rabbi that creates the
also
Golem.
the misuse of that power.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah.
A common, age-old, tale as old as time reference.
Right. Yeah, because there's
biblical and pre-biblical.
Yeah, because there is some in this case there's a mixture of some sort of biblical / astrology that's here, which is also not very Jewish, because if this was Jewish, this would be more numerology, not astrology.
Right. The references and that's what told me more than anything else is that they probably did not have anybody Jewish, or at least who was a major member of the production or direction group in the movie The Golem, because they obviously have had people who did their research, who did some research on both the story, which is pretty accurate according to Spinoza's writings in the 19th century, of the Middle Ages story.
Right.
And yet some of the random fun cinematic aspects they throw in when Rabbi Loew is creating the Golem are not very Jewish at all. like you said, they use astrology. You see a few symbols of the zodiac, and that's not a very Jewish concept.
Right.
Despite the Jews
Plus
use
the Jewish writings on like one of the documents, like it's all nonsense. And
It's
like
gibberish.
you and I both know like Hebrew to a degree,
Yeah.
and it's like these are nonsense words. Like
So
they don't those aren't words.
They
They're
obviously
just
had
letters that are
someone
like
who
written
took
there.
the effort to look up
Yeah.
Hebrew
It's like
writing,
someone
and they probably just got a
it's someone-
calligrapher to copy it, but it's gibberish
Yeah,
writing.
it's like someone
nonsense
who
words.
tries to use Google Translate to
Yes.
from English like Spanish or something.
Yeah. And this is more probably someone who tried, German to Hebrew to English and back to Hebrew. And if they tried that or even went to that effort, they failed miserably.
Mm.
Yeah, because we actually paused that screen and we're
Right.
like, well, okay, let's see if like we can like
Yep.
determine if these are actual words.
They are not.
And we were like, nope, none of these are words. And
Right.
and some of them like it's not just Hebrew because there's Aramaic in there too. Didn't we
Right.
discover that? Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like
We thought that there was, what would be Aramaic if they were real words, as in it was non-Hebrew grammar. It's like using, English words. For example, you're trying to spell cake and you leave off the final silent E.
You're right.
There are markers that distinguish Hebrew from Aramaic, despite that it's the exact
Was-
same alphabet. That tells you that.
Was Aramaic a written language as well?
It was,
Yes, it was, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Both the New Testament and the Talmud were originally written in Aramaic, which were written
Right,
around
I
the same
always-
time.
and
There was
there,
a couple
I
there
always
are
centuries.
forget-
portions of the Old Testament were written in Aramaic.
Okay,
Like,
I
The latter
forget
books,
that,
the latter books.
Esther especially was written in Aramaic. and
Chronicles
there's-
probably was.
And there's certain portions of some of the prophets that were written in
Yeah.
Aramaic. as well.
Anything that for Judaism in terms of our Old Testament is considered the third section, the Ketuvim, or the writing section, which is a combination of the Protestant histories and writing sections of the Old Testament.
Mhm.
Most of those are written in
Right.
Aramaic.
I just forgot because for some reason I only thought that Aramaic was a spoken language as opposed to also a
No,
written language.
think of it as like a different dialect of
Of
Hebrew
Hebrew?
because
Right.
it is very similar. Like but like you said, the letters are all similar.
Yeah. You use
but
the
the
same Hebrew
grammar is
alphabet.
completely different.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's like any of like the Romance languages where they use like kind of like the same alphabet, but
Yeah.
they're very different languages.
Yeah, that's not, they're more similar than that even. I would say probably, at least off the top of my head, the two most similar Romance languages are Spanish and Portuguese,
Mm.
of which, if you know one and not the other, you can understand from what
Yeah,
I've heard
yeah,
about
I
a
get
third
that.
to half of what the other person is saying.
Right.
And
yeah,
here
Portuguese
you could,
people definitely understand Spanish people more
Right.
than Spanish speakers understand Portuguese.
Portuguese, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So yeah, Aramaic, a lot of the spellings are different. It sounds more archaic to my ear, knowing a little bit of Hebrew and
Mhm.
being able to read it perfectly. It's harder. It's a lot slower for me to read
Mhm.
Aramaic because the spellings. It's as if I'm reading. Middle English is a good example.
Mm.
Okay, if I'm trying to speak it, I'm way off
Mhm.
because Middle English is a third German, a third French, and a third normal English.
Yeah.
But in terms of reading it and being able to translate, I can do that pretty well, but it's a lot slower.
Mm.
It's a lot slower. So yeah, it's, not to say it's an older version of Hebrew because it,
Right.
it was written or was created around the same time as biblical
Mhm,
Hebrew. But anyway, the bottom line for the Golem references, it just told me they were trying to find Aramaic writings that they probably didn't know were Aramaic and copy them as if this is the magic scroll that they're using to create the Golem. They mix in some Christian astrology with the normal zodiac that you know of, and they put it all together, and here's the magic scroll. They also, as the one of the biggest annoyances for me, is they don't even bother using the Jewish star, except the Star of David, except for like once or twice at the beginning and once or twice at
Right.
the end
Yeah,
on the
there's an
screen,
overlay,
an
yeah.
overlay. Yeah. The star that they write on the pamphlets trying
Is
to
a
give the
pentagram.
Golem to life, and that they put on his chest is a 5-pointed star. is a
So
pentagram,
essentially,
yeah.
what you're telling me is that the pentagram and the Star of David are the same. So Jews are satanic. Got
Yeah.
it.
There you go.
And I'm sure the
Problem
Golem legend taken right.
solved.
We were talking. Did this
We
help?
cracked the code, fellas.
Did this help lessen or help contribute to anti-Semitism throughout the Middle Ages? The answer is yes.
Yes, it
Yes.
did.
To both. Yeah, right.
But for like 1920 purposes, like outside of like probably a few people, we know better. Obviously, you've studied Hebrew, I've studied Hebrew and Aramaic, and it's like we know it's like wait, those are those aren't words. Like those are it's nonsense. But you know, for the public that was watching in 1920 in like Germany,
they had no idea. And hey,
no one gave a shit.
I give credit to whoever they hired to copy the writings or the calligrapher. It looks great.
Looks legit.
Looks legit. And it's interesting for some of the other magic words or spells, they have one when they summon that demon, who looks like Nosferatu, as you pointed out, right before the golem is given life.
To give the magic word.
To give the magic word. You notice that magic word is not in Hebrew. It's in English, Latin letters. It's like A-E-M, A-E something.
Right.
And they never translate it even in the intertitles. So I'm like, what is that fucking word?
They never translated, probably because they wanted to choose a gibberish word, and the attempted Hebrew and Aramaic words were just as gibberish as that name that the devil, that the demon spat out.
Yeah. It's like, it's so weird.
Which is a shame, because it would take, 5 minutes more research to actually get some real words and or some type of actual Hebrew prayer or spell.
Because they used connected like AE, which I always forget what the hell that is called.
I can't remember, but it's the Latin reference when they spell Caesar. You're right. The upside down. I always like the schwa. Schwa is the upside down E that gives the sound in English transliteration. Hooked on Ebonics be working for me.
Yeah. But what do you guys think about this movie? Did you enjoy it? Did you like it?
Go ahead.
Well, I partly for me it was hard to get into just because it was a silent movie, and so sometimes I found myself kind of not paying attention just because there wasn't a lot of talking, and when they spliced in like the what is it, the intercards or whatever,
the intertitles,
intertitles with the dialogue, it was like few and far between, so it was hard for me to.
It was one of those films that it was expecting you to kind of get the acting in, they were trying not to put a bunch of intertitles because they wanted
you were supposed to
understand
what the pantomiming was, and so but then that type of performance is gone, and so not a lot of people know how to.
I thought the actors were emoting really well, much better than.
I didn't have that same problem because I've watched. I've probably seen more silent films than you have.
Yeah,
and so I've gotten used to the idea of because F.W. Murnau, who we did when we did Nosferatu, he hated intertitles, and he actually the more he did films, it got to the point I think one of his last films, he did a film where he used 0 intertitles, and he expected the actors to tell the story without them having them, because he felt that this is the height of cinema, and you as the actor should be able to tell the story without having to say anything. So
your action should convey everything.
Bingo. And this is also another German film. So I assume they have the same philosophy. And so I'm thinking they have to tell us certain things because there's documents and whatever. So they want us to understand what's being said there. And it's also a foreign silent film to a degree. So we have to have some sort of English subtitles to that. But yeah, with silent films, a good silent film, you don't need intertitles at all. And that's really hard to do. But if you're not used to silent film, like you're saying, it's very easy to get lost, and that's not your fault.
Right. Well, it's not that it's just lost, but there was a lot of times
uncultured swine.
There was a lot of times where I was oh shit, I'm watching a movie, so I had to backtrack a little bit, and see what they were doing.
Right, you had to watch really closely, and obviously we went into this story in a completely different light. In that I knew the legend, and so as I was watching it, you're right. There were times, especially at the beginning, when I was, I felt my attention wavering a little bit because I'm I already know the story, They're telling it. They're having a few side plots, such as the
romance story.
Florian, exactly. Florian, who was the assistant to who was supposed to be the Holy Roman Emperor in the original story, but he's clearly just some type of regent.
He's the regent that's coming over.
Florian is the guy in love. Florian is the messenger.
He's in love with the rabbi's daughter. That's right.
That's Florian. Yeah. Okay. I don't think they ever name the regent or his boss, whoever that is. In the legend, that's actually supposed to be the Holy Roman Emperor, who's giving the Jews his protection or not giving the Jews his protection, and therefore letting the middle-aged Cossacks, just run a pogrom through the Jewish ghetto community. But yeah, that little love story was interesting, and it was a side thing. But then the second time I watched the movie, I appreciated both that story and the main plot line a lot more, because I thought, oh, well, this is the oldest story in Judaism, is the greatest fear of any Jewish father is that your daughter falls in love with a Gentile. And so that's it. So that as a side plot actually did work, even though it doesn't have much to do with the main Golem story in the first place.
Right.
But I thought actually the cinematography was both beautiful and also well done, well told in terms of the story. My first reaction, as it often is because of my personal biases, is that, oh, this is, a story told from an anti-Semitic point of view. But really, I'm not so sure that's true any more than it was told by clearly the non-Jewish production and filmmaking team from the time that they were in the 1920s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get that sense where they were, trying to make fun of, Jews or put them down or cast aspersions, despite the fact the heavy demonic imagery or whatever.
Oh yeah. What's funny is I didn't find the demonic imagery as my main source of what I felt was maybe a little low-level anti-Semitism. No, it was actually more that the costumes that they had the Jewish community wear, as well as the personalities that they gave the actors who were portraying the Jews. The demonic stuff was fun. Has nothing to do, as far as I know, with the original Golem legend.
It's
although
funny.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think it references, I don't know if this was intentional or just random, it references an old biblical era myth from a character named Honi the Circle Maker, who was kind of a rain dancer. And when there was a drought in the Jewish community, they called this guy Honi, who drew circles around himself, probably not out of fire, but out of chalk or who knows what else, and danced in the circle, and sure enough, the rains came. And he's kind of both a jester type figure, and also someone who, well, we remember because he's been written about enough in biblical era mythology.
So what I'm understanding about the story itself, because essentially we have these Jews that are living in what we would consider a ghetto, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So first of all, here, feel free to explain for a few minutes what that is, because that's important. We're not talking about the modern use of the word ghetto as
it's a sequestered. So essentially, it's a sequestered. You have people that are a certain type of people,
cultural or ethnic group
that are that are sequestered into a small kind of rundown part of the city that no one cares about.
Often it's closed off.
A village in a city.
It is, exactly. And most recently and famously, the Nazis created ghettos in almost all of the major cities in Eastern Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, after they took control of those areas during World War II. The Warsaw Ghetto in Poland was the most famous because there was a huge uprising by the Jews. And we're talking about squishing, let's say, 100,000 people in an area where 1 to 10,000 at most should fit. As in people in 2-bedroom apartments, there's suddenly 5 to 7 families, not 5 to 7 people, 5 to 7 families.
Jesus Christ.
Squished in one small 2-bedroom apartment.
Huge.
Yeah, right.
Right. So it's probably 20 people to one apartment.
Exactly. And basically they as in the Nazis in the early 40s were, lining these people up for slaughter. They were just keeping them in this literally enclosed, walled city within a city, this enclosed ghetto, until they could get enough train cars to cart them off to the concentration and death camps.
But so that's kind of the idea of what we're talking about with ghetto. It's not some rundown part of the city. That's kind of the more modern version.
And these ghettos go back to at least the Middle Ages.
That girl's fucking ghetto.
Right.
It's no, we're not talking about
not that type of ghetto. Yeah. The literal setting of a ghetto. And another type of ghetto, which we still call such, that you all may be more familiar with, is the little village of Anatevka from Fiddler on the Roof. We would definitely call that, despite it not being enclosed from the way the movie and the play are shown, we would definitely call that a little ghetto,
Right.
a Jewish
Now, I
village
have rented
within
Fiddle on the
a
Roof,
big
and I
city.
plan to
Right.
watch it. You know what I'm saying?
Right, there are no walls, but there's definitely boundaries.
There are boundaries, and you notice whether the Jews have expanded a little bit outside those imagined or real boundaries or not. The Cossacks in Fiddler on the Roof come in 2 or 3 times throughout the movie and rile up the town, destroy property, set fires, the usual what we call low-level pogrom.
Mm.
Yeah, but anyway, so our characters are set in a what we would call a ghetto, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there is animosity like that. The ruling group hates the Jews,
Right.
so they are, and like so there is kind of the messenger, if you call him, like, which what was it?
Florian.
Florian was his name. So Florian comes in. He is he's the representative of the empire, giving his message like that because the rabbi has made some sort of protestation to the empire, like, hey, like, don't attack our people or something along those lines, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Oh yeah, that's like the one part that wasn't clear. 'Cause
It's not stated,
it's not
and because
stated.
it's not part of the story, yet it's part of every Jewish story of the
Yeah.
Middle Ages. We assume that, yes, he's trying to seek not physical or not literal protection, as in armed guards around the city, but he's worried about external forces of, random anti-Semites, who go to attack the city once every few months, which was sadly normal in those days.
Yeah, so we have that, and because our rabbi is established, kind of like, people
He's a
like
leader
him.
and
People
representative of the
but
community.
people like him.
Yes.
Like, the empire likes him. Like, he's done a lot of good things for them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we will hear your audience, and like, you'll come to the
Castle,
the
to the
palace.
castle, the palace, whatever. Show your magic talents, whatever, and like,
Right.
we'll have an audience with you. And so, but he's also creating the golem, like, his protector.
Yep.
Right.
It's like,
He's
we're gonna
Frankenstein's
create
monster.
It's
Yeah.
insurance. It's insurance.
It's
right.
absolutely, yeah. Right.
So we get that part, and the other thing that's like, so we get that aspect of it, which is like some sort of like weird astrological spiritual thing that they're creating, which seems so very not Jewish,
Right.
in a lot of ways.
It's
but like,
really not, but hey, it works well cinematically, cinematically. So yeah, right.
it's fucking amazing. I like it. But
Mhm.
then he gets to the palace, and like he flashes, oh, the golem, he's great. He's
Yeah.
great. It's like,
they're
oh.
scared, but then the rabbi shows that he's harmless. Literally, he's just standing there doing nothing until the rabbi gives him a
Orders,
message,
yeah.
which, by the way, traditionally, as in from the original Golem legend, is supposedly inserting scrolls with instructions into the
his
golem's
mouth.
mouth.
Yeah.
Here,
It's like into like his
Like some
his
sort of
Iron Man
compartment.
chest piece.
compartment
Yeah.
behind
Yeah, it's
the
like
non-Jewish
his,
star
his arc-
inside
yeah,
his
his arc
chest plate.
reactor
Yeah,
thing, yeah.
exactly. It's his arc reactor. Yep.
Yeah, but then we also have like, well, do you have any other things to show us? Like, okay, I'm going to show you the,
And then we see a little film reel of
like a little
40 years
slideshow,
wandering in the
yeah,
desert, and
little
I didn't
slideshow.
quite get what the request was.
I
or what
assume
was,
that is Moses and the Israelites
Right, yeah.
wandering the desert, right?
We all assumed that too until he says, "Oh,
Ahasuerus.
this was a wandering Jew, Ahasuerus." Who was Ahasuerus? From a biblical
That's
point
like
of view,
Esther.
that was the Persian, the non-Jewish Persian king in the story of Esther.
Yeah, that was so fucking weird. Like, I was
So
like,
why they chose that name? Okay, they didn't want to say it's Moses to be on the nose. I'm assuming that. Fine. Choose any other Jewish, biblical or non-biblical name or reference. You have plenty to choose from, and instead,
they choose
say,
this like
"Oh,
rant.
yeah, who's my research crew to choose names for this reference? You. Find a book in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, basically. Okay, I'm going to choose the book of Esther, and here's a name, Ahasuerus. Let's not actually check to see if that
Who
was
is
a
the king
Jewish
of Per-
figure.
Who is the
Right.
king of Persia, by the way? Not
Jewish, yeah,
not
right.
Jewish at all.
Yeah, the story of Esther
whatever.
was trying to save the Jews from the king of Persia and his evil, assistant Haman. So
Yeah,
that was
but
a whole weird
I
thing.
would assume, based off of like what we're seeing, that this is Moses and the Israelites it's wandering the desert, right?
That's the assumption, but why and how that has anything to do with the plot line, even with the regent having the rabbi show him this, is and was unclear to me.
It's all
Right.
like I said. It
Show
is
me
very
more
unclear.
magic,
Right, I know,
okay,
like,
but
show me more of what you can do.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can show me the past, woo!
Yeah.
Because like everyone's
Okay.
seeing,
Tell me
so
more about
everyone's
your
seeing
wonderful
this,
people.
right.
So everyone's seeing this, I assume, like
Yeah.
where he's like
We had
he's
to
split,
suffer in the
like,
desert for 40 years, maybe trying to gain
so
sympathy.
apparently,
I don't know.
like he can split like time and space.
Yeah.
And so he can like show them the past.
I guess.
Oh, whatever.
Like it's weird. It's fucking weird.
Right.
It's
I
weird.
didn't see how that had really had a place in the movie or why they chose
Yeah,
that
I mean,
as a
if
magic
you,
trick.
If he just like made like fireworks come from his
Right.
sleeves, yeah, that'd be like,
As
that'd
he
be,
did
yeah.
initially
He did
when
what
he
he did.
first, right, when he first was introduced, he lifted his arms, he had
Fireworks.
fireworks come out, everyone was scared, but then in
And you
awe
have all these like
appreciative,
people like that you see like you would see like from Metropolis, like they look like kind of like
Yeah,
the
the
same.
heavily makeup faces.
Yeah.
all
so
these
you-
court jesters.
So you
like,
get
yeah.
that, and then it comes to the point like where like the golem is being used just for like everyday purposes.
just little errands, go get me groceries, fix this well, get me water.
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But you also have where he like the rabbis like realize like, oh shit, like because I've used this golem, if I use him any further, it's like I can't use him past like a certain point, because then it's like he becomes not evil,
self-aware.
but like he gains his own mind.
So let me insert something from the research I did on the Golem story, which they don't reference at all in the movie, but it may be what they were attempting to say of where's the line in terms of how much I can use the Golem without abusing it and having bad consequences come up, is in the original legend, you had to deactivate the Golem on the Sabbath.
Oh.
Okay, you could have him active and doing whatever you want, protecting you or running errands, I suppose,
Mhm.
6 days a week, but he had to be deactivated on the Sabbath, or else he wouldn't take instructions anymore and he would run amok.
Mm.
Okay, so even though they never say what day of the week it is in this movie, that was kind of my imagination after researching
your
the story
headcanon for this movie.
Exactly. I
is-
said, we may have hit the Sabbath, and that's why for the Jewish Shabbat, they either forgot to deactivate the golem, or when the rabbi's assistant activated him, maybe it was on Shabbat, and therefore that's why he refused his instructions and started to run amok.
Right. But
that
I
could
would
be.
I would think that would the golem would actually be perfect for that purpose, because they can't work, so they can just have the golem do things for them.
It's the famous Shabbos Goy.
Yeah.
Which the Shabbos Gentile, in other
Yeah.
words, and that of course goes
Yeah,
into
or
a
like-
meta philosophical question: Is the golem Jewish? Is he not? Unclear.
Right.
But yeah.
That's actually
So if he's
interesting.
Jewish, then he couldn't do
Right, he
work
couldn't
either
do it.
because he's one of the Jews
Right.
in the community.
But that's interesting because
It's a good point.
In
It's a good point.
Blade, they have a kind of a similar thing with the familiars. The ones that
right.
the humans that they use to go
That's
and
right.
do their business during the day.
Yep, that's right.
Well, I saw it as like possibly like because the
Is your mic on? Your mic's not on.
Sound on?
There you go.
There we go. The problem that I saw was that the guy that was the assistant to the rabbi, he seemed like more like an Igor, like, and he like similar.
Yeah.
Like, so going to that cinematic archaeology is that he was kind of antagonizing and using the golem for his own purposes.
Yeah.
And so that's like where like because the rabbi is like, no, we can't use him anymore because of what you're saying.
Right.
And it was like, well, fuck that. I'm gonna use him regardless.
Right.
And that's like where all the chaos begins.
And that could be another reason. Yeah, it was unclear. The rabbi's assistant, who was supposed to be his protege, therefore unclear whether he was supposed to be his son. It didn't imply that, but in
I saw
real
him
life,
as a,
I
he
don't
was
think
an
it
life,
is
assistant.
because
he was an assistant.
he was supposed to be
Right.
in real life he was
It's
supposed
not-
to be his
it's not
protege
his
and the next
son.
rabbi in line. No, clearly
it's not his son because
because
like
the
that would be-
daughter-
yeah.
Because he gets the inciting incident is that he finds out that the daughter is sleeping with Florian.
And he likes the
and-
daughter too.
Yeah,
That's the other
Yeah,
problem.
so out
then-
of jealousy, and it's always out of jealousy that
and then in
your
a
monster
jealous
runs,
kind of
right,
thing,
runs
he
rampant.
activates the golem, and and then chaos ensues.
Yep. Yeah.
So, but yeah, like that. So, and then like it's you have the So after the other thing that happens too is you have the after the whole like display of like the Moses and like the Israelites wandering through the desert, you have the where like the building starts to collapse because he says like, you know, do not laugh, do not like, you know, have like
don't antagonize the golem.
Don't antagonize the golem, and the building starts to shake and collapse. Like, and it's almost like this, like what you would see out of like Samson, right?
Yep.
And it's like Samson
holding
is, like,
up the ceiling beams, the pillars of the roof.
Of the roof.
Yep.
And it's like the golem saves them for the most part, and it's like, what the fuck is it's kind of like all these like Jewish like Old Testament lore,
a little bit amalgamated into this
is
movie.
like really
little
like
snippet here, a little snippet there that don't have to do with the golem,
which is great. I like.
Oh
it.
yeah, sure.
It's just like
the references are fun, but they're also confusing in terms of are they part of the specific plot line or are they
right?
Just
if you don't know like the Old Testament, like you're a little lost.
That too. Then you're really
ways.
lost. Yeah, I didn't even think about that because it's second nature to me.
Well, I mean, at the
right.
time, I'm thinking, you know, more people are religious, and so there might be more familiarity with particularly in Germany and like, you know, Christianity, and so they're probably a little bit more familiar with the Old Testament.
It's probably true in terms of the 20s and prior to when Hitler took power in the early 30s in Germany. For the 40 years or so before that, or especially the 30 years before World War I, the Jewish community in Germany was the most assimilated by choice Jewish community in Europe. As in, you know, not that they didn't want to be Jewish, but they wanted to be thought of as Germans first and Jews second or third.
And that happened, like, you know, we talked about that with when we were doing like They Shall Not Grow Old. Like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, there was a lot of Jews that joined into the war because I was like, no, we're
fighting
first.
for German. Yeah, we're fighting for Germany. We're not fighting either
Germany
for or against the Axis. Exactly. They weren't thinking of Israel
like,
yet.
no,
yes, modern Israel was starting to be resettled.
If I joined up the military and I fought on behalf of America,
right?
That's who I'm fighting for.
Yeah. Let's say let's say there's a second Korean War that's against South Korea for whatever weird reason. Yeah. It's that reference. Right. Yeah.
But yeah,
so I'm not sure that's your point. The only point I was making is, the Christians would have known their Bible probably better than the German Jews would have at the time.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by that a little bit.
Yeah, that was the one era, that 30-year, 40-year period, late 1800s, early 1900s. The German Jews were, you know, really well off in any European community they had been probably for 1,000+ years. Yes, there was still some low-level anti-Semitism, as there always was, but the Jews were, you know, well-known government officials, scholars, artisans, everything. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. But yeah, like I said, like this film does have a lot of like those, you know, biblical references to a degree. You know, not exactly super accurate. It has, like I said, it does have anti-Semitism, like you know what would have occurred back then, which is, you know, fine. You know,
that part I appreciate is that was accurate, as in it's mob mentality, just like any other.
It really was mob mentality.
Any other xenophobic hate is, you know, often you know, antagonized via mob mentality.
And then, and then, like, also going back to like what we talked about, like Frankenstein and this film are so connected because you get like kind of like in the third act or so, you have like where the golem pretty much, you know, goes ape shit and like, you know, essentially burns the fucking town to the ground. And it's like or they burn the town to the ground because of the golem, and that's Frankenstein. That's exactly what you said. Mob mentality. They're going after this guy. It's like, it's destroying our city. We need to get rid of it. And you know, although the golem is not doing anything wrong, he is just doing what he is ordered to do by the assistant. You know, by the assistant because he's quote unquote trying to protect the rabbi's daughter who, you know, just wants that Gentile dick. You know, it's
right. It's a Romeo and Juliet in a slightly different setting.
It's funny. You know, on Twitter, I was doing this like they were talking about like the sexiest non-sex scenes.
Oh yeah.
And obviously I chose like Aliens, you know, with like Ripley and Hicks.
Oh yeah.
But then I was thinking like when we were watching, we actually watched the Golem today before
Right,
we recorded. It's
right,
like,
right.
dude, like this film is like has like a super like sexy scene.
Yeah, when Florian and the rabbi's daughter are just
It's super
clearly
sexy.
in love and in lust at the same time with
Right.
each other. Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
super sexy, dude.
Yeah.
Like I might choose that film now instead of Aliens. But like so the assistant is super jealous of that. It's like, no, I'm not gonna have some Gentile ravish the rabbis, and she wants that Gentile dick. Let me tell you, because it is like hot and heavy.
She wants that GD.
they're both on the same page.
Yeah, dude, it is hot and heavy. It is like as sexy as you can get
Right,
in
for
1920.
1920.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
it is right, considering they
face
are somewhere
touching.
between first and second base. That's
Yeah.
like full
and
on
the
softcore
constant, like, yeah,
pornography
right,
Let's
in
say
1920
they-
terms, yeah.
Cheek to cheek. Yeah.
They fucked, dude.
Yeah.
Right.
They fucked.
Yeah, there's hand on chest. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
hand-
hand on chest is pretty good for 1920.
That's pretty
Yeah.
risque.
Yeah, very risque.
Mhm.
And so yeah, but like the assistant doesn't like that. It's like, I'm gonna send the Golem after
You
this
know what? I'm
bastard.
like after kind of seeing the assistant. I wonder if the whole when Walt Disney did Fantasia, I wonder if they got cues for the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Oh,
Could be.
That's interesting. I didn't think about
because
that.
because Mickey's the Sorcerer's Apprentice and he's the one that like kind of mucks everything up.
Right.
Yeah,
As
that's
usual,
actually,
trying to gain too much power too quickly
before
before
he's
you're
ready.
ready. Yeah.
That's actually
I like
very
that. I
interesting. I,
like
didn't
that.
think about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
It just came to me right now.
That's a
Mhm.
good point.
Mhm.
That's a great point. Yeah. Of course he came up with that. Because that's
they
like
got
what?
it.
That's 20,
39. Yeah.
That's 20 years after
Right.
this film.
Exactly.
But like not even almost.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
of course
Right
he
around.
did.
Mhm.
Of course Walt Disney watched this film. I
course.
guarantee.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. He
Probably
watched
at the
this film.
same time, it gave him great inspiration for what you just said, and maybe it solidified unintentionally his anti-Semitic leanings. So it may have done both.
He
yeah.
was already there, dude.
Yeah.
Like I said, it solidified his leanings. It didn't create them. Yeah. Right.
But yeah, so you have like the Golem ends up destroying the town to save the rabbi's daughter, and which is very similar to like King Kong and Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Any of these monster movies, the monster is often not evil by nature, usually not evil by nature, but ends up being the Zerstörer for the German, the destroyer of the community or town.
Right.
And it's
Civilization.
I mean in these kind of monster movies they're just more representative of like force of nature.
Yeah.
Or in
Right.
this case like a supernatural force of nature.
Very true.
but in a way, like this is actually one of the rare times like where the monster does escape, and he escapes the town, he breaks through, and he encounters a bunch of children, and he's like, and it's like he doesn't like kill the children. He's like, he's so like, oh, he's happy.
he's very gentle towards them because he has no instructions to hurt them, and so
Yeah.
his natural inclinations are peaceful.
right.
That's the key, similar
And
to Frankenstein.
the only reason that he is stopped is that the child that first encounters him like is a very young little girl. She accidentally like turns the star on his chest
and peels it off, and therefore
it's like,
that
and then like
right.
it stops him.
Right.
And that's where it's like, oh, the rabbi has saved the town for a third
Yeah,
time.
right, yeah.
It's like the
And
rabbi.
he says, "Sure, it was all me."
The rabbi has done fucking nothing,
Yeah,
by the way.
right.
Yeah, it's like, but then it's like the children are like they don't know any better. Like they're they're just sitting on top of like the Golem, like like it's not, and they're not
right. They're
Jewish.
using him as a bench.
They're like
these are the
they're
Christian
like
children from
little
outside the ghetto,
children or whatever.
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
they're
because they're
little
blondes.
right.
So.
Yep. Little, yes, it's not Scandinavia, but they look Scandinavian.
Yeah,
I mean, Prague, Czech Republic is in Central Europe, but okay, southeast of Germany.
So, but yeah, I think this movie is really, and that's the thing is like I'm kind of sad because we are supposed to get like the little girl, she just throws a star to like in the grass,
throws it in the field, and it's
because
gone.
she doesn't know any better, right? So it's like she's doing that, and it's just like, oh man, like I'm just a little sad because I know that there are more films that were done with the Golem. Like there was like 2 other films that they had done, and they're just lost to history.
Yeah.
It is really sad because
that
I
is
would
a
have loved
shame,
to
yeah.
see like what they would have done with that.
He created him, the rabbi created him out of clay, as goes the legend, and he returned to the dust,
But what
as a park bench.
what I am happy about is that of the films that remain, it's the origin story.
Yeah, which is nice. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So,
Because how different would it have been if it was like the second or third movie?
right.
Like,
Exactly.
Just like all this stuff, like this backstory that we don't get, and just like
And then it would be completely different because we have to extrapolate the backstory.
right.
We get the full backstory. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward. We can kind of guess, but like I would rather have the origin story than like the ending,
Right, or the
and then
middle.
us trying to or the middle, and then trying to extrapolate the story from there.
Right.
So in a way, I think the best case scenario happened.
Yeah.
I like the film. I think I'm glad I own it. It's a film that I will come back to now and again. But yeah, this is a great silent film, and like I said, I'm glad we brought Dan on because he knows a lot about the lore and the history, of the Jewish history that we don't really know. So why don't we give our ratings? Andy, why don't you go first, buddy?
I'm gonna give this a 3.
You're gonna give it a 3.
Give it a 3.
Are we out of 4 or out of 5 stars?
Out
of 5 stars.
Fair enough.
5.
Okay.
It's a 3 for me. Yeah, I mean, it was a good movie. Again, slight bias because it is a silent movie, and it's like hard. It was hard for me to pay attention for like the duration of the film, and that's really the only. That's the biggest thing I could give it. Other than that, I think the story was great. Maybe it's a few things that didn't quite make sense to me, but then again, that might be just a factor of time and not being part of the culture of when this movie was made.
Right.
So, yeah, 3 for me, solid 3.
Dan?
This film actually grew on me, which I was surprised that it did. Oops, that's it. Oh, we hit 1 hour. Yeah. Okay. We're good? Okay. You know what? This film actually grew on me, which pleasantly surprised me the second time I watched it. So I probably would have agreed wholeheartedly with Andy and given it right around a 3 the first time. And I'm considering that it's a 3 for its era. If you put it in modern times, it would probably get lower than that. But yes, for a silent film, for its era, all things considered, I would have first given it a 3. I think I'll improve that to a 3.5. Based on that, it did grow on me. I saw some little, I'm not sure if they were intentional or unintentional Easter eggs, but some fun little snippets the second time I watched it. And the story was succinct, and the cinematography alone I would give a 4.5. So yeah, overall 3.5.
Okay.
I'm gonna give this. I'm just gonna be a little bit higher than you. This is a 4 for me. I really do like this film. Because you and I have watched this together twice, and so the Blu-ray that I have from the Kino Classics, it has 3 different soundtracks, right? And like so, the movie they restored it brilliantly. It looks fucking fantastic. It looks great. It looks like it was done yesterday.
Yeah, in terms of restoration efforts, 5, straight 5 out of 5 stars on that point.
The first soundtrack that we listened to, it had this like really great like rock soundtrack to
Almost a steampunk, we called it.
Yeah, steampunk. It was it was really fucking great. I like that overall as the best one. I'm gonna listen to the
third. Yeah.
So we listened to the third one. We haven't listened to the second version of like the soundtrack. I'm gonna watch. It's like I said, it's only an hour and 15 minutes, so it's not like very long.
It's worth watching. I think we probably agree with that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna watch it again to get that second soundtrack. But that first soundtrack was like, dude, it's fucking dope. They did a great job.
And I actually appreciated that third version of the soundtrack because it sounded a little more almost Eastern. Gregorian, Eastern European, or maybe even Far Eastern if you want to call it that. They had something that sounded like a sitar, which I think was synthetic, but yeah.
Okay.
I was impressed.
So if you can get your hands on it, get the Kino Classics version Blu-ray. That's the best. That is the best version of the Golem to watch. You get like there's an audio commentary on there. There are 3 versions of the soundtrack of the original soundtrack that they do. I think there's also there's a film comparison on there as well. But yeah, like the film to me, it's a 4. Like it's a great silent film. We obviously we don't get the other version, the other sequels are lost. Sucks. But like if you are interested in silent film, fuck, it's great. It's really good.
Yeah. I recommend it. I would almost, surprisingly to me, almost put it up there along with Metropolis and City Lights, which are the classics among silent films.
Oh yeah, wow, that's a big
and I
didn't think that's high praise.
I didn't think I would at first, but cinematically I would. Storyline aside, however you think about it, positively or negatively, cinematically I think it. Fits up
absolutely.
There. It deserves.
They did the scenes look great. It's shot well. I actually don't know who the freaking director is on this one.
Yeah, I saw he was. It looked like a Polish name, so it looked like the German production team got a Polish director.
Right.
Who, again, based on the evidence I gave, I'm guessing he's not Jewish, although I couldn't tell just on his name.
Normally I have a ton of trivia, but with films like this, it's kind of hard to get that stuff, which is unfortunate. But yeah, like I said, it's great directing, great filming, it's a fun story. I think it's a fun story.
It is. The legend is fun, and hey, if you're not sure, if you're hesitant to commit to even a short hour-long silent film, if nothing else, go watch the Simpsons episode Treehouse of Horror. We'll get you the exact number where they have the Golem spoof, or watch the Gargoyles episode.
I was just about to
exactly that one. Watch one of those two and see how you like it. And if you're intrigued by this story and you think, hey, this really is an inspiration to Frankenstein, maybe go watch the Golem.
Watch the 1920 version of the Golem. It's actually it's free. I know Amazon has it for rent, but it is on a free domain site.
Public domain site.
Yeah,
that's where I watched it.
Yep.
So it's available pretty much anywhere you can think of. But like I said, if you want to own it, the Kino Classics Blu-ray is the one you want to get. But everyone would recommend it, right? It's pretty good. Just
I recommend to watch it. I definitely recommend both my Jewish and non-Jewish friends out there, whether you've heard references or have never even heard the word Golem, look up the legend. You can look it up on Wikipedia, and you'll see how scattered the references are, and how unsure they're all over the place. And in terms of hard evidence of when the legend was created, are few and far between. There's a lot of disparity between even the references on one Wikipedia page. So look it up. It's a quick read.
Well, all right. That's like I said, we all highly recommend it. Go watch it. Have fun with it. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of it? What do you think of the Golem? Do you hate Jews? We'll take those as well.
And don't think that I won't come and find you.
We want all the comments. Comments.
We have the Jew bear right here.
Exactly. My baseball bat is right behind me. So, careful of your comments. It's called respect. Learn what it means.
But yeah, that's our episode on the Golem. We loved it. We think it's great. We think everyone should watch it. Just give it a look. You can Dan, where can they find you if they want to find you?
If they want to find me in the comments, reach out, and I'll get back to you. I'd love, as you know, I'm a history teacher and love Jewish history and would love to have a conversation with you.
So pretty much anywhere you can find us,
you can find me.
Dan. Okay, so if you want to reach out to Dan or Andy or myself, come reach out to us on Instagram, a Circle of Jerks podcast, on Twitter at podcastcoj, and same for Letterboxd. I think it's Letterboxd, not Letterboxd. I've heard it both ways. So
that makes sense. Sounds like the GIF versus GIF, controversy.
It's just, they omit the apostrophe.
Right.
Yeah. So whatever you want to call Letterboxd, we're at podcastcoj there as well. So if you want to talk to Dan or you want to talk to Andy or myself, you reach out to us on either one of those channels, one of those social media handles, and we will talk to you for sure. And YouTube, of course, because on Tuesdays we do our live stream, Nocturnal Transmissions, and this is going to be for Circle of Jerks podcast, the main show. So come find us there, and we will see you on the next episode.
All right. Deuces.
Shalom, y'all.